talk a little bit about that. But I'm going to jump right in here and start talking to you guys about oligarchies. Oligarchies is a form of governance. Just like a monarchy, just like a democracy. There's all different kinds of governance. You go and look them up on the internet if you want. And one of them you'll find is oligarchy. You might associate oligarchy with Russians. But the term oligarchy just means a rich bloke or woman who runs stuff. I'm going to start talking about a few other oligarchs. Anyone know that guy across the pond, Trump? And that other, his wee pal, Elon. Oligarchs. Let's start talking about a few people down Westminster Way. Oligarchs. Jacob Rees-Mogg, oligarch. Rishi Sunak, oligarch. The list goes on and on. These British Isles are an oligarchy masquerading as a democracy. The whole raison d'etre of oligarchy is to make sure that we, the people that wipe their arses, are the people who are putting money in their pockets. That's what they want us to do. That brings me to the dissolution of the National Health Service. And make no mistake, because of the Barnett formula and this 8.1% of whatever they spend down here, we get to spend up here on ours, that will be the end of the Scottish NHS if we do not get our fingers out. Why do they want to destroy the NHS? Why would they want to do something like that? It's purely because they want people to be reliant on the drugs that these companies like Pfizer-BioNTech make us have to rely on. How do they do that though? Well, what they do is they start back in the 70s and they start pulling their rugs out from communities by shutting down Linwood, by shutting down pits and mines and all sorts of industry. They keep shutting it down and shutting it down and shutting it down. And then the communities end up with despair. The communities end up with no hope. They're looking for other jobs. All these little towns in the central belt of Scotland, absolutely decimated. And then they can no longer afford decent food. They end up with health conditions. We then end up relying on pharmaceutical companies to pump us full of drugs to keep us alive because of the health conditions that the decimation of these industries wreak upon us. What's coming next? The closure of Grangemouth. Oh, it's just a commercial decision. It's all owned by the Chinese and, you know, this other guy owns 50% of it. What an absolute load of bollocks bullshit. Have you ever heard such garbage in all your life? An oil-rich country that come independence won't be able to refine its own oil. Well, I've got some good news. I've got some good news to share with you on that front. Back in the days of James Paraffin Young, Scotland built hundreds of little refineries. And then they pulled all those refineries together in Addiewell and built a huge refinery there. That refinery, Addiewell, got a little bit too small and inefficient. So they moved to Grangemouth and they built a refinery there called them. And it was Scottish Oils back then. Eventually that was amalgamated with a French company and became BP. And that was the basic oil refinery we have today. Eventually sold to Ineos. Now back in 2014, that's around about the transition between BP and Ineos. They sold it to this, like one person because it makes it easier to shut the damn thing down. I was a consultant engineer back then, and I'm doing a project for the oil refinery, and I'm refurbishing pumps to make that oil refinery efficient. they eventually found out what was going on, and they parachuted in some manager from a refinery in Ireland, a failed refinery. He was there to shut Grangemouth down. Anything good was happening, they pulled the plug on all those projects. They took me and these pumps that I was refurbishing and the drawings that I was doing to bring these pumps back to original design intent. They frog marched me off the premises back in 2014. They were trying to shut that refinery down then, and it's taken them just over 10 years to get to where we are now, 11 years later, and they're finally putting the nail in the coffin of Grangemouth oil refinery and leaving Scotland, an oil-rich nation, without any way of refining its own oil. But there is a silver lining, because whether they shut that refinery or not, as soon as we go independent, we will rebuild that refinery. The land can't be sold for houses because it's so contaminated, no house builder is going to touch it. They may use it for gas storage, but when the Scots get that back in their own hands, this good stuff that's going to come out of Grangemouth, now it would be better if we could do it today, make no mistake. We need to keep Grangemouth open and running so that we always have that refining capability, because it's a damn sight easier to keep that refining capability running now and then go to greater places when we get the keys to the door and we can run our own nation. Because when we run our own nation, we have wind turbines out plenty, we have renewable fuel and power. We can take our refinery and we can run that refinery through 100% renewable power, which means people around the world, companies around the world will be falling over themselves to buy Scottish oil refined in a refinery powered by renewable energy. We will be producing, and not just fuel oils, because right now Grangemouth, it's only 30% of what comes out of Grangemouth is fuel oils. The rest is it's materials for building roads. The sludge at the bottom of these tanks is what we use to tar our roads. We take off other products to make plastics. The poly plant in Grangemouth makes polythene. They use ethane gas to crack polythene from ethane gas. They call it polyethane. We cannot lose the ability to sell those raw materials onto the open market. We need to ramp that up. We need to have the greenest oil refinery the world has ever seen. So when Scotland becomes an independent country, people will be falling over themselves to buy Scottish petrochemical products, whether it's fuel oil, whether it's chemicals, whether it's plastics, whether it's gunk to put on our roads. Scotland will be selling those products.